क्षमा हो अपराध सब जय जयति जगदीश्वरा।
क्षमा हो अपराध सब जय जयति जगदीश्वरा।
आशुतोष शशांक शेखर चंद्र मौलि चिदंबरा। कोटि कोटि प्रणाम शंभो कोटि नमन दिगंबरा। कोटि कोटि प्रणाम शंभो कोटि नमन दिगंबरा। कोटि नमन दिगंबरा।
कोटि नमन दिगंबरा।
कोटि नमन दिगंबरा।
कोटि नमन दिगंबरा।
ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखं भवेत्। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः।
Welcome to Satsang. So beautiful to be together with you all. We'll start, as always, with one of our questions that's come in advance from our global family from around the world who can't be here with us physically, so they send in questions by email or social media or whatever. So we usually start with one of those in honor of the fact that they can't actually be with us. And then we open it up to any questions that anyone here might have. How much time should we spend doing our sadhana? For those of you in the Arati, this is what I was just talking about in the Arati. This questioner didn't actually say it, but in the Arati I was speaking about how it's such a tragedy that we're always looking for shortcuts in the one thing that's actually going to give us what we want. That people are always saying things like, so what's the bare minimum I have to do? What's the bare minimum number of minutes I have to meditate? Bare minimum amount of yogasanas I have to do, like 3 sun salutations enough, or what's the bare minimum of my japa, bare minimum of anything. So here the questioner didn't actually ask what's the bare minimum, but how much time should we spend? Well, there's 2 answers to this. The first, of course, is as much time as you can. We, as I said in the Arati, we make ourselves so busy. We've always got time to do things that we want to do. We have an abundance of time. The amount of time that we spend on social media, the amount of time that we spend chatting with each other about things that are not actually deepening our connection to each other, They're not actually enriching us in any way. They're not actually getting us anywhere. They're just gossip or, empty nonsense. So we actually have time. But if you say to most people, what's the biggest problem you face? Everyone says, I don't have enough time. But we do. We have a lot of time. We just may not spend it in the wisest way. So how much time for sadhana? As much as you can spend. The more meditation, yoga, seva, introspection, swadhyaya. Swadhyaya literally means study of the self, but it's usually translated to mean more scriptural study of spiritual, inspiring texts. It literally means study of the self. But the more time we spend in all of those, the happier we actually are. The more peaceful we actually are. Much more so than based on the amount of time we spend on social media. There's all kinds of research showing that the more time you spend on social media, the more depressed you get. Literally, they have lines and graphs that go like this. Direct connection. Amount of time on social media, depression. Like that. And yet, that's where we spend so much time, or we spend it in this effort to make more money, in this idea that somehow the money is going to make me happy. So, spend as much time as you have that you can in your sadhana. But the second answer to the question is, you actually can spend all of your time in sadhana, because sadhana doesn't necessarily only mean that which I do on a mat. When most of us think of sadhana, we think my meditation, my prayers, my yoga. But our spiritual practice, which is actually what sadhana means, shouldn't end only on my cushion or my mat. It shouldn't end when I open my eyes, when I take my hands off my knees. My sadhana is how I live. My sadhana is how I treat people around me, with love, with compassion, with care. Or do I treat people like objects? Do I harm them with my words, with my intentions, with my actions? So even if you are now in the office, right? You're off your meditation mat, you're off your yoga mat, you're now in the office. Well, you still can be doing sadhana to the extent that you are anchored in truth, anchored in divinity. To the extent to which you are seeing others as the divine. That's sadhana. To the extent that you are serving, rather than thinking about what for me, but you're thinking what through me. That's sadhana. So you actually can do sadhana all day long. So the on the cushion, on the mat stuff, as much as you can. Including your seva. Seva is not always actually on a cushion. A lot of times it's in the world. But it's a very core and critical part of our sadhana. So as much as you can. But also remember that when you go into the office, when you go to work, when you're at a family gathering, that can also be sadhana. Based on how you go into it. So you can actually turn your whole life into sadhana. questions from anyone here? Yes.
Okay, I wanted to know, whenever I come across the spiritual people like you, or the highly spiritual people, either it makes me very nervous to face them, or either it makes me very emotional. Like, why is that? I've been always considering this to me.
Beautiful. So, when we're in the presence of spiritual people, as she said, sometimes it makes me very nervous, and it makes me very emotional, like I get tears in my eyes. So, nervousness comes because most of us think that we're putting on a show. Most of us find it very difficult to believe that we actually are lovable, good, beautiful, divine beings. And so if you get into most of our deep psyches, what you'll find is there's some part, it's what we call imposter syndrome. There's some part of most of us that feels like, well, yeah, the reason that people like me is because they don't really know me. The reason people respect me is because they don't really know me. That if people really knew what a mess I am, no one would like me, no one would respect me, no one would hire me, because who I am is such a mess. And a lot of us have that inside of us. And so we tell ourselves that the reason that we are still in relationships, that people love us, that they like us, that we still have our jobs, that people respect us, is because they don't know really what we are like inside. If you are someone who has that deep belief, when you come in the presence of someone who you feel can probably see through that, it can make you nervous because there's a sense of, oh my God, they're going to see the truth. Like, I won't be able to hide from this person because they can see. And so there's that sense of nervousness. They will see the dark, the ugly, the bad, the wrong in me. But then something very beautiful happens. And hence the emotion, that feeling of emotion, is we realize, oh my God, they can see. And they're still here. And they're still smiling at me, and they're still looking at me with love. And it for a lot of us, it's the first time in our lives of feeling like we are actually seen as who we are and loved as we are. I remember when I first met Pujya Sadhviji, it became very clear to me very early that he knew everything. That there were no secrets from him, that he saw and he knew the deepest, darkest, ugliest, worst, everything. That he could see it all. And I remember writing home and telling some friends of mine, there wasn't email here, so I used to actually type up letters and, send them in envelopes. And it seems like eons ago, it was just a few decades, but I remember sending letters home to friends about what I had experienced and being here and what it was like and how amazing it was that I had met this being who could see everything and who knew everything. And almost unanimously, I got this response of, oh my God, that must be so uncanny. That must be so off-putting. Isn't that really nerve-wracking to feel like you're constantly in the presence of someone who knows everything? And I wrote back, no, actually it's the most extraordinary experience I've ever had, because I could convince myself that everyone else I knew liked me because I had put on a good show, liked me because I had convinced them that I was a likable person. But in the presence of someone who sees, you can't convince yourself of that. And so for me, it was the first time in my life where I was in the presence of someone who I knew everything, who I knew could see everything, but who told me I was wonderful, and who looked at me with so much love and so much acceptance that it did nothing. I mean, it just brought, as you say, tears to my eyes. So I think that's really common. It happens to a lot of us. And it's really beautiful, because if you allow the message in, what the message is, oh, I don't actually have to put on a show. I don't actually have to hide. Who I am at the core is not wrong, is not bad, is not dark, because look, he sees and he's still here. She sees, she's still here. And that's incredibly powerful if you let it sink in, of, oh my God, who I am at the core. No pretenses, no stories, no drama, is actually someone to be smiled at, someone to be loved, someone who is wonderful. And for me, that was a massive newsflash. And it changed my life. So, yeah, so whenever that happens, just let it in. Really let yourself feel that awareness of, wow, I'm being seen. And I'm being loved. Meaning who I am is lovable. Which is such a beautiful thing to know about yourself. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah, Abhi.
What is the ultimate divine spiritual truth of life, and how it can be achieved while living in this sansaric life? You already mentioned few things just few minutes back, but request you to throw more light on it.
So picking up from where we were yesterday about the meaning and the purpose of life and how to experience it, even living a samsari existence, living in the world. So the meaning of life is not very complex. It's been given to us over and over in so many different ways and so many different scriptures. It's, you could say, to wake up, to have moksha, freedom, to be free, to have enlightenment, to have God realization, to have self-realization. These are all just different words describing an experience of what you could call capital K, knowing, or capital T, truth. But an experience of that truth, a knowing of that truth. The इसको आप साइलेंट पे कर दीजिएगा. धन्यवाद. The truth of who we are, the unchanging truth of who we are. Because truth, of course, is only truth if it's unchanging. If I say today is Saturday, it's true, but you wouldn't call it capital T truth because it will not be true tomorrow and Sunday. Wasn't true yesterday on Friday. For something to actually be truth with any weight in it, it's got to be something that doesn't keep changing every day, every hour, that's not different. You know, if you pick up the phone now and you call someone in Australia, it's already Sunday, right? So it's got to be something that's true across time and space. Well, my false identity, my role, whether it's based on my job, whether it's based on the size and shape of my body, whether it's based on my bank account, whether it's based on my relationships, that keeps changing. My identity keeps changing. I'm student, then I'm this, then I'm that, then I'm this. I'm so-and-so's child, then I'm so-and-so's spouse, then I'm so-and-so's mother, then I'm so-and-so's grandmother. My roles keep changing. What is it that doesn't change? That's going to be true. All of that which could not be true tomorrow, I mean, who are you? I'm a doctor. Well, imagine you get fired from your job. Now what are you? Right? Having a degree doesn't make you a doctor. If you're not working, what are you? So, if something can change that quickly between being hired or fired or retired, it's clearly not the truth. If something can be changed through being divorced, it's not true, right? I mean, in the moment you might be so-and-so's husband or wife. What if they divorce you tomorrow? Then who are you? So, that which is true has to withstand the test of time and space. Is it true not only here, but is it true, if you get on a plane and you go to LA, is it still true? Right? So, that truth is not of the body. The body's always changing, right? I mean, every single time you go to the doctor, they take your height and weight. Keeps changing. Not the height so much, but nonetheless, they check it every time. What you look like changes. The money in your bank account changes. Your relationships change. What doesn't change is soul, spirit, consciousness. And the purpose of our life is to realize that, to wake up to that, not just in an intellectual, academic way of I am soul, but actually in an experiential way of being able to, it's described very beautifully by a lot of teachers, to be able to change the channel. These days we just have remote controls, but it used to be that you actually had a knob, that you changed TV channels or radio channels with a knob. And you could go from channel 4 to channel 6 to channel 8 like this. Or you could change the dial on a radio to different stations. They're all available simultaneously, and you can go from one to another. Well, in the same way, we should be able to go from an awareness, an experiential awareness of I am in this body. And it's beautiful. It's a wonderful body, and we have body awareness that tells us when we're hungry, when we're full, when we're thirsty, when we're tired. when a rose smells really nice, when we're loving listening to a beautiful piece of music, when we're loving giving a hug to a loved one. We've got physical sense body awareness. But we also should be able to turn that channel and have actual awareness of that which is not body. That soul, that spirit, that deep awareness of who I really am. And that's what we're here for, is to actually have that awareness. And to realize, again experientially, that who we are is not separate from the divine, that it's not just my soul, but it's actually soul, undivided, one, and that we are not separate from anyone or anything else. I'm not separate from a blade of grass, from a river, from anyone else on this planet. Not separate. We're one. That experience is what we are here to have and to know and to live in. And how to get there? Practice. Meditation. Focus, awareness, attention. That which you focus on becomes your reality. That which you give your attention to becomes your reality. So if you're constantly seeing the world in difference, oh, he's handsome, she's ugly, he's rich, he's poor, he's this, she's that. If that's how you look at the world, that's what's going to be reinforced. Right? We see the world as objects, with lust, with greed, with comparison, with envy, with anger. These are all symptoms of seeing each other as objects who are either objects that might be very useful for my pleasure or my getting ahead, or objects that are hindrances on my path, that are somehow blocking me. It's an objectification. It's the exact opposite of where we're going. So can you practice as you move through the world seeing self, seeing divinity, seeing spirit? And that's how we get there. We make a very concerted decision, an effort, that that's how I'm going to see the world. I'm going to see everything I do as the divine flowing through me. Whatever I may be doing. I could be washing dishes. I could be pumping gas. I could be stuffing envelopes. I could be designing a website. I could be teaching a class. I could be doing anything. But I see it happening as though I were an apple tree giving apples. It's just happening. The divine is working through me. I'm just here. Just here as an instrument in the divine's hands. And we surrender. We surrender and surrender and surrender. And every time we surrender, we get closer and closer to that experience. Because we're surrendering not to another being. It's not, as we were talking about the other night, it's not, okay, fine, you win, I give up. It's, I surrender my ignorance, my false sense of separateness into truth, into you, into oneness. Other questions? Yes.
Sadhviji Pranam. As you said that the whole life should be sadhana, each and every karma should be a part of sadhana. But in the sansaric world, we indulge in lot many things which we may not be part of sadhana, like you have to do some things, like it may be, you might be thinking later that it was immoral or it was not up to the mark. Then number one, that how we can turn it into sadhana. And number two, if we have done it, how to be free from your past karmas. Hari Om.
So, seeing life as sadhana doesn't mean that you don't have to do the grudge work. Grunge work. You do. Boss will say, redo this, do it again. Or you know it wasn't good, it wasn't up to the mark. You have to redo something. Or you do something that you know was wrong, you're going to have a karmic fruit of that. Wasn't in your most conscious, skilled moment. It doesn't mean that you don't have to go through those, you do. But it means we see everything as sadhana, meaning a spiritual practice. And so, for example, if we've done something due to which there's a karmic unfolding that is not so pleasant, we see that as sadhana. You know, you go to the mandir, you do puja, you walk out from the puja, and what do you get? Prasad. Right? Sometimes it's raisins, sometimes it's nuts, sometimes it's some very sweet, oily, like halva things, so many different things. But you don't get to choose. You don't say, oh, I want this one, give me that instead. I'd like something else. You don't file a petition with the temple that you'd like to change what they give out as prasad. We used to get halva, now we only get bananas. What happened to my halva? You understand, it's prasad. It's been given by God. And if it's a cashew, if it's a raisin, if it's halva, if it's a banana, if it's some water, if it's a tulsi leaf, whatever it may be. And that's what bringing sadhana into your daily life means, is that which you receive, we take it as prasad. And so if I've done something, for example, that wasn't up to my mark, I wasn't conscious, I wasn't skillful, meaning skillful on a consciousness level. I wasn't acting out of integrity, out of patience, out of awareness, out of love or truth. Maybe I was acting out of ignorance or greed or lust or anger. Well, now there's a fruit coming from that, a result coming from that. That result is prasad. It's coming to me for me to get a blessing with it. What is prasad really? I mean, cashews you can buy in the market, raisins you can buy in the market. What is prasad? It's that which is blessed, and that which by partaking of it, we take blessings. So when things come as our karmic fruit, we take them as prasad. It's a blessing because it is an opportunity for the divine to work through us. And the divine works through us in all kinds of ways. And so if it's a bitter experience, you could say, from something you've done, take it as a prasad, that you are being blessed with this opportunity to clear that karma, so that after clearing it, you can be free and move forward. And also so that through the clearing of it, you learn the lesson, whatever lesson it's there to teach you. And that through it, you become stronger, you become closer to God, through taking everything that comes as prasad. Any other questions? Yeah.
So there was a point in my life where I was using spirituality almost as a excuse or a way to avoid my worldly duties or responsibilities, to say.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Could you say that again?
Okay. So what I said was there was a phase in my life where I used spirituality or the teachings of spirituality almost as an excuse to avoid my worldly duties. For instance, there is a part of me which wants to make money and which wants to grow in the material world. And that requires effort and hard work and dedication and pain and all of those things. And spirituality kind of gave me an excuse to like run away from all of those things, repress that part of me which wants to engage in that, and hence like kind of repress all the growth and everything which could have come if I had like embraced those parts of me. So there's almost like a mental block for me right now when it comes to spirituality, because in the past I've used it as an excuse, and now it feels a little bit shallow for me to like once again like engage in it. So like how can I reintegrate spirituality into my life when I have abused it in the past in this way?
So, spirituality should never be something that we use to, or try to use, to escape life. What you find is, wherever you go, there you are. So if your mind is full of anger, of lust, of greed, of jealousy, of judgment, well, wherever you go, there you are. I mean, in psychology, we call it pulling a location. It's the idea of, well, if I were just on a beach in Tahiti, everything would be so much better. But the you who's sitting on a beach in Tahiti is the same you who was suffering in some other place, because you take yourself with you. So spirituality cannot actually be used as a way to escape ourselves. Now, people try. There's something called a spiritual bypass, which is this idea of not looking at myself, not looking at my issues, my struggles, my shadow, my inner conflicts, my psyche, not looking at those negative patterns, you could say, or not negative, I don't like that word. Let's call it unskilled, unawake patterns. And so instead of that, I'm just going to, chant all day long and pretend that I'm not having that thought, or I'm just going to only talk about nice, light things, and I'm just going to pretend that I'm not seething inside, that I'm not actually full of rage or jealousy. But of course, it's going to seep out. It seeps out in my actions. And that's what this spiritual bypass is this sort of pretending that I don't have this rage, that I don't have this jealousy, that I don't have this ego, that I don't have this ignorance, because see, here I am all day long, just meditating and chanting. So obviously that's not an ideal situation, because you end up literally trying to run away from what's going on inside of you, which doesn't work. You have to look at it, you have to heal it, you have to work with it. You have to go through it in order to go beyond it. You can't bypass it, because then it just becomes this festering wound inside of you that comes out in all sorts of other ways. But in terms of when you say, I used spirituality as an escape not to be in the world, even though I wanted to make money and I wanted to do other things, I wouldn't be quite so hard on yourself. I would say that at that time in your life, you made a decision to not go on the exact same path that everybody else was going on, of careers and money and whatever it was that led you into spirituality, you still got the benefit of it. I mean, it's like people, for example, who say, well, what about all those people who get into yoga just because they want to lose weight? Like, is that okay? Aren't you, don't you think that those people are somehow less than? And I always say, no. The power of yoga is such, it's so strong that it doesn't actually matter why you get into it. Yoga is going to transform you. Whether you get into it because you are on a deep spiritual quest, whether you get into it because you want to lose weight or you've got a bum knee that you want to treat, yoga is going to transform you anyway. So will spirituality. So even if you got into it because you were at that time not really clear about how you wanted to move with career, with money, with other responsibilities of, the culture and society, well, don't sell yourself short. Don't sell spirituality short. There must have been, if you were doing it with any kind of sincerity and depth, there must have been a beautiful benefit to you. And that benefit must still be with you. And don't let yourself or anyone convince you that it was an escape, that somehow making money and having a job and buying a house is real life. And meditating and praying and doing seva and doing yoga is somehow an escape from real life. That isn't true at all. We all have different dharmas. We all have different life paths. We all have different purposes. And for many of us, the dharma is in the world, in what we would call the grihast ashram phase, in a family, in a workplace, in the world, like you say. And for others, our dharma is in ashrams, in monasteries, doing seva, doing sadhana. And for some, the dharma is both. There's a lot of people who spent a whole bunch of their life first in the world and then have shifted to this. And there's a lot of stories of people who spent a handful of years in the spiritual world, typically when they're young, who were, monastics in their early 20s for a while and then went back into the world. You hear that a lot with a lot of the Western Buddhist meditation teachers. A lot of them had actually spent time in Buddhist monasteries and in their youth, took that power, the teachings, the lessons, into the world, ended up, in many cases, having families, having jobs, being in the world, but still really benefiting from, and in many cases, building a life based on the spiritual experiences that they had when they were younger. So don't convince yourself that it was an escape or that it was wrong or bad or that somehow spirituality, hijacked you or kidnapped you away from your real life. You had a beautiful experience for however long it was, whether it was months or years, and it gave you a depth of experience and understanding. Now you're in the world in a different way, but hopefully you still have that depth of understanding. But don't look to spirituality suspiciously. If you're having second thoughts about decisions that you made in your life, that's something to really contemplate and introspect on and learn from. Try to look back with gratitude and compassion for the you who made those decisions, for the experiences that you got. Feel him, understand him. See him as a younger man who comes to you, telling you what he's feeling, what he's going through. Have that same compassion for him. But don't put suspicion on spirituality for perhaps not fully clear feelings that you now have about how you spent those months or years. Then you just prevent yourself from benefiting both ways. Instead, look back on it with gratitude for what you learned, with gratitude for the experiences you had, with gratitude for the freedom for the time you had to not have to be punching a time clock and bringing home the bread and putting it on the table. It was a luxury. It was a luxury you had that so many people don't have. And I'm sure it must have benefited you greatly in the rest. But yeah, you're going to be financially, career-wise, in a different place than if you had started it right away. But that's okay. There's no right place to be. See your life as a beautiful amalgamation of beautiful spiritual learning and now time in the world with a career. But don't compare it to where other people are who had different experiences. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. आपके साथ हम कल शुरू करें, ठीक है? कल आपकी क्वेश्चन सबसे पहले ले लेंगे, ठीक है? You're leaving tomorrow. Okay, chalo, we'll take it quickly. Okay, no problem. Okay, no problem, that's all right. We'll take it.
If we see globally...
I'm sorry?
If we see globally, the situation is very dangerous. Like, war is going on somewhere. If you see about the world, then many things are happening. So how our Sanatan Sanskriti and the saints and our own, the people, what we should do actually to bring peace to the other countries. Our brothers and sisters are suffering.
Yeah, beautiful. There's so much war, suffering in the world. What can we do to end that suffering? Well, the first thing you can do is make sure that your life is an embodiment and a transmitter only of peace. Okay? You may not necessarily be able to bring peace to people in Ukraine, but you can certainly bring peace to people living around you. So at least begin where you know you have the power. Make sure that no one ever feels badly or is hurt in any way based on anything that you say, anything that you do. And then expand it a little bit. So that's just your inner circle. That's those with whom you are directly interacting. But then expand it and start to look at, what do you buy? What do you wear? What do you eat? The choices that we make have huge impacts on suffering in the world. For example, hopefully all of us here are vegetarians, but the meat industry is one of the greatest causes of suffering in the world, and I don't mean just to animals, but it's one of the greatest causes of world hunger. It's the single greatest cause of climate change. It's the greatest cause of the deforestation of our rainforests. It's a major contributor to almost everything that is wrong in our world today. but also what we buy. So for example, things that seem really harmless, coffee, chocolate, tea, cotton. Well, all of these things are grown in fields around the world. And they're grown by farmers who are either being treated well or not well. They're being grown either organically in such a way that the crops are healthy, the land is healthy, or they're being grown non-organically in cases in which they're being sprayed with pesticides and chemicals, and the farmers are exposed to those, and then the farmers get cancer and their kids have birth defects. And those chemicals sink into the groundwater and they go into our rivers, and then people who drink from the rivers get sick. And people who are growing food in those farms, they get sick. And then, of course, everything has to be processed. The cotton that gets picked gets turned into our t-shirts or our pants. Well, are they being produced by women and children in sweatshops in unsafe conditions because I'm committed to buying the cheapest possible brand and I refuse to pay an extra few rupees or few dollars for it? Well, as long as cheaper, cheaper, cheaper is our shopping motto, companies around the world are going to keep running women and children through sweatshops and child labor in unsafe conditions, because it's the only way they can give us what we want at the price we want it. And so you start to look to expand your radius of peace, right? Because suddenly you start to be able to say, oh, I'm going to only buy organic and fair trade. You can still, nothing wrong with coffee, tea, chocolate, cotton, have it. But buy it organically. Make sure it's fair trade. Are there ways to choose? I mean, can we stop buying leather? Right? Not only is it cruel and awful to the cows, but even if we say, well, maybe the cows must have been dead first, it's the greatest contributor to pollutants in the Ganga River. So when you look at the river, you look at people who are suffering and dying through drinking the water of the river or bathing in the water of the river. Well, that which runs off from the tanneries is some of the greatest pollutants. Can we stop wearing leather? Can we stop wearing silk? Like, really, do millions and billions of little worms actually have to die so that I can have a sari? Really? I mean, it's that necessary? There's life in them also. I mean, okay, it's not as complex as human life, but there's some kind of a nervous system in a worm. I've never actually seen someone, take a knife and cut a worm in half, but I'm sure if you did that, there would be some kind of reaction that would make you know the worm was suffering. But from what I've been told about how silk is made, they literally take millions of them and throw them into like vats of boiling water so we can wear silk saris. So start looking for ways where in your daily life, how can you make a difference? Little things. Little things. And then, of course, you spread that energy out, and you spread that ripple out, and we make commitments that we will not be part of it. I mean, without going into too much of a lecture on this, so much of what's happening in so much of the world is due to our dependence on fossil fuels that we're importing. If we didn't need to import oil from so many countries of the world, we would stop letting them get away with the human rights abuses that they are perpetrating. But because we are dependent on the fossil fuels, it's like we're slaves. We can't say anything. Nathan, oh my God, the price of gas is going to go up. Then I won't get elected. Right? So if we really want to be able to have power as countries, to be able to impact other countries to move in the right direction, but we have to be independent and not dependent on them for something that makes us have to keep our mouths shut about what they're doing. Which means we've got to break our dependence on fossil fuels. Aside from the fact that it's killing our environment. So there's a lot of ways that you in your individual life can bring peace to a lot of beings in the world. And then collectively, we work to bring peace to all those other places as much as we can. And never forget the power of prayer. You know, there's a lot of scientific evidence, lots and lots, about the power of what's happening in one place impacting other places. We know now, we've got a lot of great scientific research showing us what I'm thinking over here is impacting what's happening over there. And so, don't underestimate the power of your prayer for them. And what the science has shown is collective prayer is even more powerful. The more people you can gather together to pray at the same time for the same thing, the more powerful it is. So organize prayer circles. Bring people together. Pray for peace. It'll really make a difference. Thanks for a beautiful question. Have a absolutely beautiful, wonderful rest of your evenings, everyone. I will look so forward to seeing you tomorrow. And a beautiful day to our family joining us from online, from all over the world. And so much love to you all.